what makes a good society? How do I know if my country, my region, my city is a good society? When we ask that question, the answer we get back often comes in a monetary term, measured in terms of gross domestic product, or GDP. We often find that our media, our politicians will tell us the economy is growing, our lives are getting better. But we know that GDP is flawed. GDP can be misleading. Wars and natural disasters are good for GDP, but doesn't sound much like progress to me. GDP is also incomplete. GDP has nothing to say about the environment. GDP is blind to issues of fairness and justice. GDP is not a good measure of whether we have a good society. For some people, the answer is something different. It's happiness. It's actually quite easy to measure happiness. You can send out surveys to the population, ask them how satisfied they are with their lives, and come back and come up with a score. But is a happy society a good society? Now, don't get me wrong, I like being happy. I'm sure you do too. But is happiness really what it means to be a good society? The British philosopher John Stuart Mill famously posed the question, surely it's better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. And I think it's a really important point. It's good to be happy, but happiness is not a complete measure of a good society. So for an answer to this question, I'm going to turn to a different philosopher, one who was writing 2,500 years ago. And yes, you've guessed it, he's from Greece. I'm talking, of course, about Aristotle. And he talked a lot about what it means to live a good life and the importance of us making virtuous choices. But in order to make those choices, he said society must create the preconditions to do so. So for him, a good society was one that created the conditions for what he called eudaimonia, what is normally translated into English as flourishing or thriving. And that to me sounds like a very good definition of what it means to be a good society, one in which individuals are flourishing and thriving. And I'm pleased to say that I'm here today to tell you that my colleagues and I have been working out a way to measure how much our societies promote flourishing and thriving. And I'm here to share with you the results for Greece. The measure we have is called the Social Progress Index, which asks three fundamental questions about any society. First, are the basic needs of survival of every individual being met? Food, water, shelter, safety. Secondly, does everyone have the building blocks of a better life? Education, information, health, and a sustainable environment. And finally, does every individual have the opportunity to pursue their hopes and dreams with rights, freedom of choice, freedom from discrimination, and access to the world's most advanced knowledge? Using 50 different indicators, we bring together all these different factors to create a score for a society on a scale of 0 to 100. So let me show you the results. And I'm going to show you on this chart. And what I've done is I've put social progress on the vertical axis. Higher is better. And then just for comparison, just for fun, I've put GDP per capita. So the country in the world with the highest social progress is Norway. So Norway scores 88 out of 100. Not perfect, but the highest in the world. And the country with the least social progress, I'm sorry to say, is Central African Republic, with a score of 31. So Greece is somewhere in the middle between those two scores. Where? Well, I'm pleased to say a lot closer to Norway than Central African Republic. Greece scores 74 out of 100 on social progress. What does that mean? Well, let's give you some context in terms of some of your neighbours. Bulgaria and Romania are slightly lower on social progress. They're also lower on GDP. Italy and Spain are higher on social progress, also a bit higher on GDP. You also might look at, say, countries like Poland in Central Europe. These tend to have a very similar GDP to Greece, but slightly higher social progress. So that's sort of how Greece is doing in the middle of the pack. But we can actually drill down further. My colleagues and I have just been working with the Regional Policy Directorate of the European Commission to produce a social progress index for the regions of the EU. In Eurospeak, these are called the NUTS 2 regions. There are 272 of them, and we've created a social progress index comparing all these. And here we are. Here's it on the same chart, social progress on the vertical axis, GDP per capita on the horizontal axis, and each of the regions of the EU represented by a dot. And I want to make two general observations first. I'm going to put in now the regression curve that shows the average relationship between GDP and social progress. And we do actually see that as societies get richer, social progress does tend to increase. But we also see that there's lots of noise around the trend line. Simply put, GDP is not destiny. Other choices really, really matter in determining our level of social progress. The second thing to notice is that the countries that are above the line, they're the ones that are overperforming. They're the ones doing a good job in turning their economic resources into social progress. The countries below the line are those that are underperforming, not doing such a good job at turning their wealth into well-being. So, how's Greece doing? Well, what we'll do is we'll zoom into a certain part of this chart where we'll find the regions of Greece. Zoom, zoom. So here we are. So, which region of Greece has the highest social progress? It is Crete. The second highest is the northern Aegean, and the third highest is Central Macedonia. Well, that was complete rubbish. Yeah? You're supposed to cheer. No. Get out of here. We're doing this one again, okay? No, it's a quiet shh, and then when I say Central Macedonia, you cheer. Nice and simple, isn't it? Okay, just follow the instructions. And the third highest is Central Macedonia. Now, what you've probably started to notice is that these are not necessarily the most economically developed regions of Greece. In fact, the three richest regions, Attica, Southern Aegean, and Western Macedonia, all score lower on social progress. Let me pop in all the regions of Greece here, and what we'll see, Epirus, the poorest region of Greece, has quite a high level of social progress. The Peloponnese has the lowest level of social progress and isn't the poorest region. So GDP per capita actually isn't a particularly good predictor of how well the regions of Greece are performing on social progress. Now, what we can do now is drill in a bit further into this data and look at how the different regions of Greece are performing on the different aspects of social progress. And let me start with the area that we call basic human needs. This is the food, water, shelter, safety stuff. And there's actually some quite good news here, which is that most of the regions of Greece are clustered pretty tightly around the curve, so are performing pretty close to the average, with one exception, as you can see, Attica. And this is very interesting, because this is actually a pattern we see in other capital regions. In my city, London, in Brussels, the capital of Europe, these capital regions seem to have high GDP, but aren't able to convert those resources into meeting the needs of the population much better than other regions. I don't know why, but I think it's a really interesting question for policymakers in those kind of regions, and asks important questions about how they're using their resources. So that's basic human needs. The next dimension is foundations of well-being. And the story here is not so good. We've got a couple of regions above the line, but actually most Greek regions are below the line. They're underperforming on this issue. What's driving this? Was a couple of things. First of all, every single Greek region underperforms on the area of access to basic knowledge. It seems that the basic education and schooling system is not performing as well as it should be. That's what the data says. The second area where all the regions of Greece are underperforming is on access to information and communications, internet, mobile phone, etc. And again, that's an interesting finding that every region is underperforming there. There's also some good news here, and it's actually about Epirus. This region of Greece has far and away the highest score on health and wellness. It's the poorest region of Greece, but it achieves the best health outcomes. I don't know why. You'll have to tell me. And I think this is a really important finding, because if we can find out what Epirus is doing right, then those lessons can actually be shared with other regions of Greece and other regions of the EU. Now, the third dimension is opportunity. And here, I'm sad to say, we get the most negative story. Every region of Greece is underperforming on opportunity. And this is about trust in the police, trust in the legal institutions, corruption, discrimination, gender equality. It's a very, very strong finding and a real issue of concern. And by the way, we actually, analysing the data, see a very strong relationship between opportunity and life satisfaction. So having low scores in opportunity is not good for making you happy, if that's what you care about. Now, that's a bit of a sad result. And so let me finish with a bit of good news, which is that within opportunity, there's one component, which is access to advanced knowledge. And here, it's a better story. A very wide range of scores for the regions of Greece, but actually the majority of them above the line. And I'm very pleased to see that actually Central Macedonia performs particularly well. Ladies and gentlemen, our world is on the move. Where it goes to is our decision. The Social Progress Index shows us that we are not slaves to GDP or anonymous economic forces. Our choices matter. So let's choose to live in good societies where everyone has the opportunity not just to survive, but to thrive. Thank you.